Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. Nancy hated holidays and weekends. All normal people couldn't wait for Friday because it was followed by the most pleasant days of the week. For Nancy, the upcoming weekend always had a negative connotation. And what could be joyful in grueling housework while ruling with family scandals? This morning, she and her husband had already kissed. Barely Nancy thought of her friar. As he was born on the sofa was, opening one eye. Spouse grumbled, "What are you beating like a mouse here? You're doing everything on purpose to poison my day off." The man pushed away the pillow he had been hugging before and took a deep exhale. Nancy rolled her eyes, saying she had someone to blame. She wrinkled her nose and stepped farther away. "Ben, have you ever betrayed your entire family?" The man smirked. "No remedy will take you, and you're not talking my teeth. I'm having a hard time, and you're going back and forth. I can't just tiptoe around. I've got a lot to do. If I wait for you to rush around, I'll never get anything done." This dialogue put a lot of stress on Ben. He couldn't stand it when his wife outweighed him. And today, her intransigence especially grated on the man's nerves. With a heavy sigh, the head of the family Duden took the position of a thinker, and since his head did not want to hold independently, had to prop it up with his hands. Only after gaining a stable position, he honored his wife with a long, unkind look. "You can't keep up because your hands are in the wrong place. You walk like a somnambulist, stumbling at every step. You're a walking disaster, not a woman." Nancy was feeling through the rag that was wiping the dust with water. She did it with such force that the spray reached the sofa, then abruptly jumped out of the image of a thinker. His whole body now expressed indignation, and his right hand, like that of the leader of the world proletariat, extended from strictly forward. Only the legendary cap was missing for the completeness of the picture. The man's hangover speech was also suffering from slurred speech. Out of all his poor vocabulary, what came to his mind were these crooked hands, not seeing that I felt bad. Nancy was satisfied with the effect of her graceful revenge. She mockingly advised to drink less, then it would be good. "And you're wrong about Krivorishko. In this regard, you have no equal. For 3 months, she asked me to change the socket in the corridor." Ben shook his head. "I did everything. What are the complaints? You come and find out. Used to be sparks flying. Now it's electrocuted. They say that craftsmen like you, Ben, are golden hands. But please don't insult me in my own home." The man's voice trailed off, and his eyes sought to go out of their orbits. The torment of a legitimate husband gave Nancy satisfaction after the man had been reduced to an extreme degree of helplessness. The woman clutched noisily at the rag and began rubbing the furniture with fanatical exasperation. Ben watched his spouse's actions for a few seconds, then resolutely cocked his head. But from this ill-considered action, red and purple circles swam in front of his eyes. The side effect of a cheerful Friday was due to the fact that the day before the man drastically overdid it and was now unable to hold an upright position. For more than a minute, his large body spontaneously collapsed on the sofa. And there were tears in his voice. "Nancy, why are you being so cruel to me? It's bad enough without your lectures. And you're adding to the pain. You're a woman, so you should be merciful." Nancy grinned wryly. "Mercy doesn't extend to the likes of you, Ben. I'd rather pity a benign cat on the street because he does not drink vodka and all that burns." Men belittlingly looked at his wife, Nancy. "All right, let the good cat be dearer to you than your own husband." Well, there was no water to take a sip of. This call broke against the wall of incomprehension. The woman looked at the sufferer in male form and said with disdain, "Legs are there. Go to the kitchen and serve yourself." Ben grabbed the left side of his chest and faked a heart attack. But the woman only grinned. "Ben, it's time for you to change your cardiac repertoire. Not jamming vodka in the garage with Akis of various stripes. They're on a non-alcoholic regimen." Nancy gathered up her cleaning supplies and proudly walked past her husband. She was already behind the door, but apparently something clicked in her soul, and she called out to her daughter Helen, Stop dying. Father is suffering. Bring him some water. God forbid. He's going to drop his hooves. We don't have money for a funeral." From somewhere in the back of the apartment came a grumbling sound. "You can't do this without me. I'm entitled to a decent night's sleep once a week." The daughter walked barefoot, fell into the kitchen, and cast a glance in her mother's direction. But the latter did not respond to her indignation. Helen filled a glass with water and headed for the sofa on which her father was suffering on drinking Ben in one gulp, and left the vessel. "Thank you, daughter. I have you as a true friend and comrade. And our mom, she's as cold as a queen from a fairy tale." Nancy couldn't stand it. She appeared on the living room doorstep, but now with a rolling pin. Really, this instrument in her hands of the enraged woman looked more like a bat. "I see you've been sneaking around behind my back. Well, what I want to tell you is this. There are no lackeys here, and I don't have to fulfill your wishes. You two have been wandering around till morning, and then you make some kind of claim on me." Helen realized her mother was in a bad mood today, so she rushed over to her and kissed her. "Mommy, don't be offended. It's just a figure of speech. You're the most beautiful, the warmest." "True," Daddy Ben mooed enthusiastically and threw out his hand in greeting. Mouth front. Not even the toughest woman could resist such a display of affection. She considered herself weak. She looked down at her husband and daughter with revelry. "Get yourselves cleaned up, and we'll rush you, so you both overslept tomorrow. And it's a long way from lunch." Helen gave another kiss to her daughterly love. "Mom, we'll call this meal Saturday lunch." Women affectionately slapped their daughter's soft spot. "Go get dressed and hide. You've got a nightmare on your head. Mom, you don't understand anything about modern fashion. It's the latest fashions. Half the city is wearing these things." Helen kissed her father and ran to her room. Ben struggled to get up from the sofa and wandered into the bathroom. "I have to take a shower. I've got you too stormy today." Soon there was a steady sound of water, and Nancy calmed down a little. She tried to turn her attention to her current problems, but suddenly her husband's cheerful voice came from the bathroom. "Nancy forgot to tell you that Molly is here. I met her yesterday, and she asked if you could come by. As soon as she's free. She's not much of a lady. She could have come herself. The crown won't fall off her head. Do as you please. My business is small." I was asked. I passed on the information. In just 10 minutes, Ben had undergone a dramatic transformation. A healthy blush burned on his cheeks. There was no more hangover cloudiness in his eyes. Nancy held her gaze on her husband and said with satisfaction, "Well, now it's different. You look like a human being now." The man threw a wet towel into the bathroom and tried to hug his wife, but she wrinkled her nose. "Ben, do you smell so bad you can snack?" Apparently, he expected a completely different reaction and said with irritation, "You cannot please you. Then you do not like this, then the other. You don't break your nose. Like a girl before her first wedding night." Ben, thinking what you say, would be ashamed of his daughter. Helen informed in a cheerful voice, "Mom, don't worry. I am aware of the relationship between members of the opposite sexes. You must have forgotten that your daughter is in medical school." While arguing, the mother and father did not notice that their heiress appeared in the kitchen. Helen immediately rushed to the table and started grabbing everything off the plates. "Man, I'm so hungry. I have a beastly appetite." Nancy looked fondly at her daughter. "Sit down at the table and eat. What's with all the hand-grabbing?" Helen managed to chew and at the same time say, "Mommy, it tastes better that way. If you do not know, I can inform you that the tradition of eating without using cutlery is developed in many countries. So don't swear at your daughter. Don't waste your precious nerves. No nerves will be enough with you. Dad's been drinking a lot. And you were out at night." The smile fell off the girl's face. "Mommy, did you choose the wrong verb? I didn't go out with girls. Remember, I warned you that Lara's wedding is next week, so we got together yesterday for, like, a bachelorette party." The woman waved her hand nonchalantly. "A bachelorette party is held on the eve of the wedding, not the week before." Helen looked condescendingly at her mother, and we're having a rehearsal. Nancy repeated the dismissive gestures and said in the same tone, "What a life. Everyone's rehearsing hairstyles, bachelorette, and bachelor parties. What's the use? It doesn't. Family life doesn't depend on those little things. It can't be rehearsed." The daughter said nothing to her mother. She looked expressively at her father, as if expecting him to support her. Ben had managed his lunch and was now drinking tea. Although the wedding topic was far from his interest, he couldn't refuse his daughter's support, making a smart expression on his face. The man remarked to his mother, "You're not on a roll today. You're picking on me. Now you're talking about the wedding. I don't care how people get married. The wedding should be fun. Who would doubt it? You're all about fun. I don't care about other people either. Unless it's about my family. Ben, instead of affecting your daughter, you're all over everything. Nancy, Helen is already a full-fledged citizen. You forgot that she is already 19, and she can go out till morning and even get married without your permission, has every right to." The woman's indignation took her breath away. "Ben, do you even think about what you're talking about? What marriage? Look at her. She's just a kid. Honey, think of yourself at that age. By the way, if memory serves, you were 19 when we got married." The man made dancing paws with his feet and smirked ambiguously, expecting a similar reaction from his wife. But Nancy cast a glance in his direction. "That was the biggest mistake of my life. If I hadn't flown headlong into marriage, I would have studied at the Institute, gotten a good profession, and my life would have turned out very differently." This confession made an unpleasant impression on Ben. His lips merged into a single thread. His cheekbones set. "And if I understand you correctly, you've regretted being my wife all these 20 years. Suddenly, he was pouring out a barrage of sludge on me. But it's better to know the truth late than to stay in ignorance for years. Nancy tried to say something in her defense, but the man beat her to it. "Nancy, can you still make it right? Find a decent life partner. If I don't suit you." Ben pushed his plate away from him and got up from the table. A minute later, the apartment door slammed and Helen rushed into the hallway. "Daddy, wait," but the head of the family had already left the house, which he had always felt warm and cozy. Only barely caught, and the smell of male perfume hovered in the cramped room. The daughter looked reproachfully at her mother. "I don't understand why you arranged all this. And then you have to think before you say something. Don't you realize you've hurt Daddy?" Nancy quietly asked me what I'd done to him. The daughter was on the verge of a breakdown. "With your confession, sometimes it's better to be quiet than to speak. And then, if you hadn't married Daddy, then I wouldn't have been born. So I'm your biggest mistake too." Ducking her head with two neat ponytails, Helen headed for the exit, but halfway there she turned around. "Aunt Molly's here. She asked you to stop by. She has some kind of emergency message for you." The door slammed again, and Nancy was left alone with her unhappy thoughts. She was already regretting having said so many nasty things to the people closest to her. But the germ of doubt that had been brewing in her heart for a long time now, especially strongly lately, began to bother her. So when her daughter informed her of her girlfriend's upcoming wedding, this unpleasant feeling immediately reminded herself. The brothers were born and raised in a village lost among the forests. But like most young people of the post-war era, they were eager to take part in something important to the country and take. The elder James, after serving in the army, set out to conquer the North. He dreamed of sailing the sea, but after 2 campaigns he realized that he would not make a navigator. The first failure did not deprive the enthusiast of faith in his abilities, and James got a job at a mining enrichment plant. In this field he found himself and wrote optimistic letters to his relatives. In one of them he reported, "In another month I will get a separate apartment and marry a wonderful girl. Lissa also works at the mill, taught chips. I hope she will fit into our friendly family." A little later James wrote that he and his young wife celebrated a noisy housewarming party, and they were given a 2-chamber refrigerator from work. At that time, such an appliance was the dream of all Soviet housewives, so the brother's mother was proud of her eldest son's achievements and read his letters aloud in the store. Rural women oohed and awed. "I envy you. No luck. What a good son. And he sends them money every month." Envy bit the younger brother's soul too. Alex also dreamed of success and getting rich. However, his plans did not include moving too far away from his native land, and he found an interesting occupation in the regional center. After studying at a vocational technical school, Alex got a job in a construction organization. He started out as a simple laborer. Then he entered the institute by correspondence and became a site foreman. In his personal life, too, everything developed in an increasing way. Alex married a modest girl, Kate, and a year later Nancy appeared in the family. The first childhood memories of his youth are connected with his father. Alex took his little daughter to the construction site and showed her from a bird's eye view of the mountains. "Watch, daughter, and memorize how cities grow." Nancy was breathless at the panorama below, but she wasn't scared at all because Daddy was there. She was very proud of her father. And first in kindergarten and then at school, she told her peers, "My daddy has the most important profession in the world. When I grow up too, how will he build cities?" Parents condescended to the plans of the little daughter, but so far did not interfere with them. Only when the girl became older, her father began to make attempts to redirect her to the wall around so many other very interesting activities. "You're a girl. You'd better choose a quieter profession. Could you be like Mom and become a nurse? It's a very respectable profession. You'll always be clean, warm, and in a white coat." Hearing such speeches of her husband, Kate was indignant. "Alex, why advise your child on something you have no idea about? Medicine is only at first glance an angelic field, but in reality, there's suffering and death every day. So don't get ahead of yourself. The time will come, and Nancy will choose a career of her own. Your brother and his wife are very well settled in life, rolling around like cheese in butter. They've got a big apartment and a car. They can afford things that others dare not dream of." Nancy listened to her parents' arguments and memorized. She knew about the existence of her relatives, but she had seen them only once. The girl was in 3rd grade when Uncle James, along with his wife and young daughter, came to visit them for 2 days. Dad's brother was very funny and joked a lot. Life is like a weather forecast. Everything comes true exactly, but at a different time. In general, Uncle James had a saying for every occasion. I remembered only one saying from a whole arsenal for all my life. If we imagine that an ordinary gymnasium is a school of wizards, then all students can be divided into 3 categories: wizards, magicians, and sorcerers. The girl laughed at this caustic definition because in their class there were only solid oaks, sorcerers. She decided to share her findings with Molly, Uncle Sergei's daughter, even though her cousin was 2 years younger than Nancy. She knew more than she could ever dream of. Molly couldn't sit in one place for a minute, and she was always bugging Nancy. "What are we going to do with you and me stuck at home? Let's go for a walk. You probably have friends." Nancy was eager to say there were friends in the yard and at school. "But your mom's looking at us like that." Don't mind her. She always looks that way because she doesn't trust anyone. Indeed, Aunt Lisa was the complete opposite of her husband. She was silent all the time and sighed unhappily when, after much persuasion, Nancy decided to take her cousin out in public. The aunt had rudely lashed out, not at her daughter, but at Nancy. "If you have an itch in one place, go for a walk, and Molly has nothing to do in the yard." Nancy cried with resentment. Alex stood up for his daughter, Lisa. "What's the matter? What do you run into?" "On the wall. You know, in our family, it is not customary to yell at children, and even more so to humiliate them." Aunt Lisa gave a squeamish wince. "I've already noticed that it's chaos around here. Everyone does what they want to do. In our family, the rules are a little different." The aunt had already prepared to share her experience of proper family life, but her husband judged her fervor, trying to restrain himself. James reprimanded his wife Lisa. "You must have forgotten that we are guests. It means that you shouldn't go into someone else's monastery with your own rules." Molly's mother blushed with indignation and began to prove her husband right with the stubbornness of a blind man. "What did I say that was so special?" "Nothing. I'm just trying to protect our daughter." Uncle James threw both hands up as if he were going to throw a ball into the net. "Lisa, how many times do I have to tell you that a child is supposed to socialize with other children? He's supposed to be spoiled and do impertinent things." To his distress, Alex decided to support his older brother. "Really, Lisa, you have nothing to be afraid of. In our house live decent people, and the girls are not threatened in the yard." The aunt, with the same squeamish expression on her face, objected to the owner of the house. "I saw these decent people yesterday. Some of them are playing dominoes, and others are in the bushes thinking for two. I can imagine what kind of kids grow up with parents like that. Such a campaign is definitely not suitable for our daughter." At the end of this tirade, Lisa grabbed Molly by the hand and dragged her daughter into the room that the owners had allocated to the relatives. Already from there, the woman shouted in her own voice to James, "We're going home tomorrow." James felt uncomfortable with his wife's behavior. He grinned wryly and said to his brother, "Yes, Alex, real life is different from a fairy tale in that everything happens in it. On the contrary, you marry a beautiful princess who, after a year or even earlier, turns into a wart and already a toad or a viper." The next morning, the guests left for home in a hurry. Nancy did not even have time to say goodbye to her cousin. Since then, she has disliked her aunt with all her soul and once confessed to her parents. Molly is good and Uncle James is good too. Aunt Lisa is a very bad person. If she comes to visit us again, I won't let her in the apartment. Alex tried to change the 10-year-old's mind. "Nancy, you can't judge a person by one act. Aunt Lisa was just in a bad mood and said something stupid." "Indeed, she is kinder. Aunts don't say such mean words." The wall was destined to keep its promise because Uncle James and his family did not come for a long time. The girl began already to forget about the offense against her aunt. One day at dinner, her father said sadly. James called, said that he was diagnosed with a serious illness, and he no longer works at the mill. Kate expertly said, "Unfortunately, many people pay for a comfortable life with their health. After all, nobody pays big money for nothing." Nancy realized that this conversation was not for children's ears. She kept silent and memorized everything her parents said. A few days later, the girl learned from her father that Uncle James and his family were preparing to move. Doctors said that in the north for his brother is unsuitable climate. In short, they are preparing to move. The daughter was burning with curiosity. She involuntarily burst out a question, "Daddy, and they will live with us again?" "No, Uncle James and Aunt Lisa are buying an apartment in our town. They have already found the right one." This news made Nancy happy. "Oh, that's great. So Molly's gonna live here now too, and we're gonna see her." "Of course you will. Your siblings should keep in touch." But Lisa wasn't in the mood for sibling bonding. Immediately after moving in, she smiled wryly and remarked that we were very lucky to have the apartment. James wanted to be close to his brother. "I think it's best for relatives to keep their distance in every sense." Kate responded to that hint with, "Lisa, don't worry about it. Alex and I are not in the habit of imposing our society on others. But our house is always open to guests, so you can come to us at any time, even at night." Lisa only shook her lips and flashed her eyes angrily. Because Nancy's mom had caught her off guard with her offer, despite her wife's prejudice against her brother's family. James was seeing Alex on a regular basis. They visited the old people in the village together and involved their daughters in these events. Lisa tried her best to prevent such meetings. Sometimes she even went to provocations, but it is known that any obstacle only hardens the character and friendship between the sisters, despite the tricks of Molly and Mother, only became stronger. The only thing that united both families was the worry for the older brother. The change of climate did not improve Sergei Evseevich's health. He slowly faded away before the eyes of his relatives. Kate, through familiar doctors, tried to arrange for her husband's brother specialist consultations in famous clinics. But even the most famous luminaries of medicine spread their hands. Unfortunately, the process is very neglected, and it is almost impossible to fix anything. James died when he was only 47 years old. Molly's father's death was the biggest tragedy of her life. For Nancy, it was also the first serious loss, because she loved her kind and cheerful uncle, who had his own quips for every occasion. It was the short and very apt sayings that she remembered most. Trying to calm the crying Molly, she repeated time after time, life as a holiday. And on holidays you can't work. Such days are supposed to be fun. The cousin was surprised. Nancy, what do you want to say to yourself? I just remembered your dad's favorite expression about life and holidays. I think he would be telling you, Molly, right now to stop crying. Molly looked at Nancy in disbelief. Do you think he would say that? I'm sure he would. You might even think he's giving you that order through me. You know, my mom says that everyone who dies goes up into the sky and watches their loved ones from there. Molly froze with her mouth open. She must have been in a state of prostration for a minute. Then she jumped out into the street. There she stared up at the starry sky for a long time. Nancy realized that her younger sister believed in this mystical story about the souls of the dead. The older sister's hunch was confirmed. A few days later, Molly showed up at their house on a Sunday afternoon early in the morning. The girl was excited, her eyes burning when she and Nancy were alone. She mumbled mysteriously, "You were right. They all live in the sky." Nancy darted her eyes out in bewilderment. "Who are they?" Molly sighed eloquently. "Who? The ones who died. You were the one who told me. Have you forgotten?" Nancy remembered a recent conversation about this. How you found out it was. Nancy became a little creepy because her sister's eyes were so fierce. Molly moved closer to her sister and whispered, "I had a dream about Daddy today. But it wasn't like a dream, it was real. Daddy told me that where he is now is very nice." Nancy asked, "I hope you didn't tell your mom about your vision." "What are you talking about? She's gonna drag me straight to counseling if I tell her something like that. Let it be our little secret." "We did." Molly looked at Nancy like she'd discovered the secret to eternal life, or something like that. Childish maximalism it is. Nancy couldn't deny her sister such a small thing. The common grief brought the girls and Molly even closer together, and she paid less attention to her mother's eternal nagging. By the time of graduation from high school, she and her parents had practically nothing to do with each other. Molly lived her own active life and made very bold plans for the future. She shared them only with her cousin. The native mother was in complete ignorance. After the death of her husband, Lisa completely withdrew into herself and even business. Her only daughter was of little interest to her, not to mention the events that were unfolding across the country at that time. The apartment was unaccustomedly quiet, and only the clock flowed measuredly on the wall. Nancy ate, dwelling on the unpleasant feeling of discomfort. Now she regretted very much that she had told her husband, and at the same time her daughter, all sorts of nonsense. Emotions were bursting out, and the woman said in a low voice, "Amazing things are happening in this world," and unnoticed, I turned into an exact copy of Aunt Lisa. She's just as quarrelsome and mean. Can people change so drastically? What's wrong with me? I wasn't like this, wasn't I? Or just didn't notice? The woman didn't even try to find an answer to this question, because she knew it well, only she was afraid to say it out loud. She reluctantly set about cleaning up, but youthful memories came flooding back with renewed vigor. She could no longer resist the urge to see her sister, and Nancy began to hurriedly pack. Just need some air and distraction, and the bad thoughts would finally leave her head. I'm going to go tell a tale from my kin. Even though Natalka's made a lot of blood for me, still, we had a beautiful moment together. 20 years have flashed by imperceptibly, and during this time, a lot has happened in a series of different events. There were moments that today Nancy would rather not remember. But time, if it does not even cure old wounds, makes one look anew at the affairs of bygone days. Such were roughly the thoughts hovering in the mind of the 40-year-old woman. As she rode the bus to the neighborhood where her aunt lived, Lisa bore her widowhood and fate with fortitude. And even with a sense of pride, she grieved briefly after the funeral of her beloved husband. She found solace in occult practices. In the late 90s, many were obsessed with fortune-telling on tarot cards, astrological predictions on the stars, and other hoaxes. Molly's mother was not just interested in such directions, she thoroughly studied them. And the aunt did not even try to hide from her daughter, where she disappears in the evenings. Molly was horrified when she found out and immediately ran to her relatives. Uncle Alex, Aunt Katja, help. I'm very afraid for my mom. She goes to some very dubious events, and strange people I'd never seen before started coming to our house. Alex promised his niece, "You're not prematurely pining away. The devil is not as bad as they make it out to be. But I'll be sure to drop by the other day." The man wanted to make an appointment with his sister-in-law by phone, but Lisa did not pick up the phone. So he went to the widow's house. The woman did not open the door for a long time. And when the guest was about to leave from behind the massive door, there were signs of life in the form of a ball of footsteps and mumbling. Then the door opened slightly, but a chain prevented the guest from crossing the threshold. The hostess did not waste time on greeting, but asked sternly, "Why did you come?" "Lisa, it's me. You didn't recognize me. I was recognized." "And what of it?" "We have nothing to talk about." "I need to talk to you." "James, no. And there's nothing to connect us anymore." The woman wanted to close the door, but Alex managed to get Lisa's foot in the door. "Wait, I wanted to talk to you about Molly. She's my niece, and I care about her." The woman sang snackily. The guest was not even on a joke frightened, thinking that this viper in human form will now release its poisonous sting. But instead of this instrument, Lisa used the words, "My Molly has someone to take care of her. So we don't need your help, kinfolk, and we're better than Sasha. Go goodbye and don't come back. I don't want to see you or your wife or your restless Nancy. She's always leading my daughter astray. And one day I shall simply be forced to take measures to counteract her bad influence." Again, in the voice of the daughter-in-law, there was a threatening hiss, and Alex pulled his foot away. The door slammed shut in his face, and he still stood on the landing for some time, thinking over the last words of the relative. At home, the head of the family told his wife in detail about his visit. In conclusion, added Katusha, "You will not believe it, but for the first time in my life, I experienced panic terror. From Lisa smelled something so demonic. And honestly, I don't want to go out with her anymore." Kate laughed. "Alex, you're a man. Don't get your head in the game. Only highly respected people can believe in witchcraft and fortune-telling. But you are an educated man." Alex thought for a long time before answering. "Katja, but you won't deny that conspiracies and curses work." Men at work told such stories that gave me goosebumps. Nancy decided to add her weighty word. "Mom, Dad's right, because magic rituals work. It all depends on who's doing them." Molly told me something that takes your breath away too. Kate hugged her husband and daughter. "My darlings, you are bringing your own fears upon yourselves. We have rumors like that at the hospital too. And sometimes we hear even worse stories. I can assure you that there is no scientific proof of magic, white or black." "Still," Nancy exclaimed, "but something does come true. It's pure coincidence. Human life is full of different events, so coincidences are not rare. But for some reason we try to explain such facts with mysticism." Nancy very much wanted to believe her mother, but all the subsequent events convinced her that there are no coincidences. After that fateful visit of Alex to her brother's widow, only a few days had passed, and Molly appeared at their house herself late at night with a suitcase. It wasn't hard to guess from the redness of the girl's eyes that she had been crying. Kate rushed to her niece at what had happened. "Don't you look like yourself?" Molly appeared in the hallway. I can't take it anymore. Mom's completely lost her mind. She let a whole bunch of strangers into the apartment. She says they're the best magicians in the country. They sort of came to the contest, and my mom voluntarily and gratuitously decided to give them our apartment for temporary residence. Alex excitedly said maybe I shouldn't have left my mom with suspicious people. The niece hotly objected. Uncle Alex, what can I, a schoolgirl, do? I told her that I'll stay with you until these people change from our house. They're generally so harmless, except for one. Her name is Military. She's all black, and her eyes are black too. How'd she stare at me? I almost fainted when she said in a huge voice that my future was in gold that glittered like a husk of seed. My knees buckled in an instant. My mom went after that woman for asking questions, and I packed my bags for you. You should have. You don't want to be jinxed by that. Nancy took her sister's suitcase and led her guest into a small room where she had long ago equipped for herself a girlish realm. Since the topic was a hot one, the girls continued to discuss it. Nancy's parents were also excited by the unexpected appearance of their niece. Alex had time even before dinner to find out the meaning of an obscure word. That's why he started the evening meal with a minute of enlightenment. I've looked through the encyclopedia and found out that in Spanish it means seeing the future. So your mom's guests are nicest fortune tellers. In the circle of relatives, Molly felt under reliable protection. She answered quite cheerfully, yes, I don't really care how the name is translated. It's just that I'm worried about my mom, because she's often 20 in parallel worlds. And I don't like it at all. There are only a couple months left, and school will be behind me. And then I can leave this town, and everything will be just a bad memory. Kate complimented her niece. That's right, Molly. You're a smart girl, and I'm sure you'll get into college. Take an example from your sister. Nancy went to college. She's going to be an architect. This profession will never lose its importance. Molly grinned. No, I'm not going to design cities, and I don't want to stay here either. I'll go to the capital. There are more opportunities there. Molly stayed with them for almost a week. Afterwards, she confessed it was the most wonderful time of her life. But suddenly, Lisa showed up in person to pick up her daughter. This time, however, the relative was the personification of peace. Kate, though surprised by the visit, was also hospitable. Lisa, come in. We were just about to have tea. The girls made cupcakes. Let's taste them together. Mila smiled at the invitation, but refused to have tea. Some other time, we'll have tea. There's no time now. I'm actually here for Molly. Lisa stomped in the hallway, waiting for her daughter to gather her things. At last, Molly appeared with her suitcase and said to the guest in a monotonous voice, You don't hold a grudge against me. I didn't mean to offend you. Thank you for taking Molly in. Alex was very glad that his daughter-in-law showed some humanity. You're welcome. We're not strangers. Aunt Lisa looked at him with a strange look, and then said in the same colorless voice, We should be careful at bus stops, especially in the evening. They're running around town without great-grandchildren. Drunk. An icy chill ran down Nancy's back. Aunt Lisa, what are you talking about? Did the aunt look at her? It's no big deal. I just wanted to warn you. And you get ready for the wedding. You'll be married soon. Nancy laughed in her aunt's face. Aunt Lisa, you're not making any sense. You sound like a real fortune teller. I'm going to have to disappoint you. I'm not getting married in the next 5 years. Only after I graduate will I plan to start a family of my own. Her aunt looked at her again with a penetrating gaze. There's no escaping the fates. What one's destiny says will come true. Molly signaled to her sister that her mother was a little out of sorts to spare her relatives an unpleasant visitor. She took her parent under her elbow and led her towards the exit. Mom, everyone, let's go home. Picked up from your friends. All kinds of nonsense. And now you're talking nonsense. When the sister-in-law and niece disappeared out the door, Alex twirled his index finger at his temple. What became of the woman? Katia is talking such nonsense. That's your department. Tell me, is Lisa really out of marbles for rollers? Or is she just plain fortune teller? Kate grinned. More like the second. It's a special time right now. It's the millennium, and old superstitions have come to life and new ones have emerged. The public's interest has to be piqued somehow. Here's a hoaxer from different levels trying to do just that. The topic of conversation smoothly flowed to different ways of fraud, fortune tellers, and fortune tellers. Every member of the family had a story to tell. Therefore, dinner and the rest of the evening turned out to have a mystical tinge. In the morning, all three of them forgot about Aunt Lisa's visit and her ramblings. It wasn't until months later that Nancy remembered everything her mother had talked about in Molly King's hallway. Nancy barely had time to touch the bell button before the door swung open, and all the passions were back in her arms. "Nancy, how have I missed you? You have no idea how long it's been since we've seen each other." "Probably 5 or 6. A disgruntled voice came from the darkness of the hallway. "Molly, let the man into the apartment." "What's the fashion?" On the doorstep to hug Molly, Mom waved her hand. "This is my sister, and I have every right to greet her with violent emotions." Molly let the guest through and pointed towards her room. "Come on, we'll have tea later." "Nancy, I agree." I nodded only from the table. "So I don't want to eat. I got my own things to do, and I'm here for you." "Yeah, I met Ben yesterday, and I told him to tell you to come by right away." "You have no idea what I dug up the other day. Probably some kind of mind-blowing wedding scenario." "No, you didn't." Molly shut the door tight and winked at her sister. "Mom's gotten very inquisitive in her old age, and a few times have gotten her in the act." Nancy muttered, "Let her eavesdrop rather than engage in dubious business." Molly stared pensively at one point. "Yeah, I'm having a hard time re-educating her. Honestly, I can't believe Mom was ever obsessed with any of this stuff. Although, you know, sis, deep down, I believe in predictions myself sometimes. You're not alone." "I do too, especially lately." Both women were silent, each thinking about something else. Molly went to college after high school, but graduated with great difficulty. She took 2 academic leaves of absence because she was woefully short of time for the main business of her life: weddings. Nancy's father, Alex, gave his niece an inexpensive camera for her 17th birthday. It happened just before Nancy's wedding, and Molly decided to capture the event. For 2 days, she ran around with the camera, shooting everything. But the newlyweds never got a CD. For a long time, Molly fed them breakfast, and then she left and did not appear in her hometown for 3 years. Years went by in life. Every day more and more pulled the spouses into its maelstrom. And Ben and Molly less and less often remembered the day of their marriage. And for the first time in 20 years, with Molly's encouragement, Nancy remembered that she had once shone in a snow-white bridesmaid's gown. She sighed sadly and sat back in her chair. "Come on, Molly, dazzle my imagination. I'm getting ready." The woman shuddered. "Oh, you scared me." I hesitated for a moment. "Now just 1 minute." Molly rushed to the fashion, on which were laid out in strict order all the paraphernalia necessary for a wedding planner. Guests with a grin nodded in the direction, prepared in the props. "You got a job coming up." "You're right, as always." Some moms I know asked me. Their granddaughter's getting married on Saturday. Actually, they've been common law for 2 years, and suddenly they're getting married. It's usually rushed when there's a new addition to the family. I'm never interested in such details. My business is to please clients and receive for their services money. Those are the 2 pillars of my business. Nancy said with a sneer. "I'm sure you're doing a great job with that." Molly jerked her chin up. "I mean, I'm trying. Do you know how competitive this market is?" "I have no idea. I'm not really in the entertainment business. I'm more concerned with my home and my unenviable job." My sister sighed. "That's when I was drinking. I shouldn't have dropped out of school." "Well, let's not talk about sad things. Do you want to know what my competitors call me?" Nancy looked at her sister and mentally noted that the years had only slightly affected Molly, and she still remained as vivacious as in her youth. There wasn't a single wrinkle on her face, and her blonde hair was neatly localized down to her shoulders. As her sister didn't answer her question, Molly began to shake her. "Nancy, why are you silent? I don't recognize you." The guests laughed. "I was speechless at the sight of your beauty. You're all dainty and well-groomed, aren't you?" "Aya." Molly let out a heavy sigh. "What beauty is there? Pitiful glimmers of the youth that escaped me. It's nice to eat." "So, where were we?" "The competition. They gave you the nickname Molly." In a well-practiced voice, said, "Please love and welcome. This is a rare exclusive." Wedding General Nancy clapped her hands. "You know what, sis? There's something in that, isn't there? I can't judge your professional qualities because I've never been to one of your events, but you have the exterior to match the rank of general. And I'm talking about 20 years in the business. I love making people happy. Too bad most of the time that happiness is fleeting. That's for sure." Suspicious sounds were heard behind the door, and Molly was silent. The guests looked at their cousin with fear. "Do you have mice?" Molly laughed. "One mouse of enormous size." The hostess walked to the door and said loudly, "Mom, stop scaring people. Come on in." The door opened slowly and creaked open just enough for Lisa to slip in. "Molly, the kettle's boiling. Are you going to have tea now or a little later?" "Mom, in about 5 minutes we'll have a little more in confidence." Okay. You girls talk. And I'll wait for you in the kitchen." The door closed, and Molly confessed to her sister. "Sometimes I feel like Mom's trying to make up for her past mistakes. I feel sorry for her, but I don't know how to help her." "Molly, it's very simple. You have to love your family. Parents value love, care, and respect for their children above all else." Anastasia's voice treacherously trembled, and Molly hugged her sister Nancy's ears again. "Don't beat yourself up. It wasn't your fault. It was an accident. That's just the way it is. But your mother warned us about the accident. We didn't believe her. We thought her words were nonsense." Nancy felt tears come to her eyes. She remembered again the terrible day her parents had died. It had happened shortly after their wedding to Ben. The newlyweds learned that a new addition to their family was expected and hurried to please the future grandparents. Alex, according to a long-established tradition, decided to celebrate this event and invited his wife to dinner at Kate's restaurant. Who knows, maybe this is the last time fate gives us such an opportunity. The grandchildren will come, and you and I will get stuck in troubles. Hey, young people, are you with us or not? Nancy had been a cab driver since the first weeks of her pregnancy, and the thought of going to a catering establishment made her nauseous. "No, I'd rather not. I'll ruin your evening." Kate seconded her daughter. "You're right, Nancy. In your position, it's better not to take any chances." Alex, for such an occasion, paid for his new suit, and his mother wore a sequined evening dress. They ordered a cab, and in farewell, the mother, already from the car, shouted, "Tomorrow morning we'll call each other." Nancy did not even suspect at that time that it was the last time she saw her parents alive. As eyewitnesses told later, the couple were among those waiting at the bus stop for the last bus. Nancy's parents usually used their own car, but her father never got behind the wheel, even if he killed a little. So that evening, the couple decided to take public transportation. Besides them, there were 6 other people at the bus stop, but no one noticed how a foreign car jumped out of the corner at a great speed. Everything happened in a split second, and the silence of the night was broken by the screams of the victims from the action of the accumulated. Nancy's inadequate parents were in the epicenter of the accident, and both died on the spot. It was a terrible blow. Had it not been for Molly, Nancy probably would not have recovered from that tragedy. Strangely, after the deaths of her late husband's relatives, Lisa had permanently abandoned her fascination with otherworldly practices. Molly still had her arm around her sister's shoulders as well. Nancy stroked her hand. "Thank you for everything." "Why are you thanking me all of a sudden? Are we breaking up?" "No, it just came to me. It happens to me a lot too. I've been to other people's weddings. It's exhausting. Sometimes I have to turn myself inside out to get the damn fee in full. You know how demanding clients are nowadays. You sign a contract where everything is laid out, and some particularly zealous characters start picking out flaws. About 2 years ago, I had such a case that one super-duper dad rejected my script. The man found a few games with guests offensive, and he reduced the fee himself without warning. I didn't know there was such a thing. How'd it end? In court. I'm not the kind of guy who gets screwed over with impunity. That asshole paid me for moral damages, but I got a lot of nerve. Molly, you're really good. A real general. The woman corrected the wedding general. Speaking of birds, you and I have been talking, and we've completely forgotten about the main thing. That's right. You were going to surprise me. I'll get right on it. Just be patient, and you'll be in for a surprise. Molly began fiddling with the equipment. She accompanied the process with exclamations of horror. Everything is covered with dust. The equipment doesn't like such carelessness. We'll have to fix it right away. Nancy remembered how her younger sister in her childhood had also worked wonders, for which she had been scolded by her parents. She really wanted to help Molly. Maybe I could be of some use to you. You know, my Helen is very advanced in technology, and she taught me a few things. Without turning around, my sister cheerfully said, "Thanks, I got it. The thing is, it's an old tape, and you can only watch it on an old player. I can't get my hands on it, and I can't get my archives in order." Molly fiddled with the equipment for another 5 minutes, but her efforts were successful. Something inside the device buzzed powerfully, and the TV screen showed a splash screen. Nancy and Ben together forever. The sound is a little bad, so we'll be watching a silent movie tonight. Both women held their breath into the screen. They didn't notice Lisa silently enter the room again the moment the bride did. That is, the Nancy from the past tried to wave her hand in white gloves. Tears of happiness. The symbolic bouquet fell to the floor. Molly and the mother very clearly pronounced bad luck. Unfortunately, it was Nancy who flinched and looked at her aunt. Molly swooped down on her mother. "Mother, are you like Hamlet's father's shadow walking around the apartment? Couldn't you have knocked?" The older woman excused herself. "You said 5 minutes. It's been half an hour. The kettle's cold. We're in no hurry." Lisa took to the kitchen, muttering to himself, "I don't know how to please her." Nancy, in a trembling voice, asked Molly, "Maybe that's enough movies for today. Wait, that's the most important thing I haven't seen. Just 1 more minute. You don't need patience. I remember this moment well. When my bouquet fell, a strange woman picked it up. She said something else to me, but I couldn't make it out. It was awkward to ask again at the time." Molly, a key clicked, and the machine buzzed loudly again. The flamboyant-looking guest first held out her bridesmaid's bouquet, but immediately changed her mind. Her lips moved, and Nancy heard clearly, "It is not your destiny. You cut down your tree for me." White streaks ran across the screen, soon replaced by pictures of wedding fun. The guests whispered creepy. "And that's exactly what you wanted to surprise me with." Molly grinned smugly. "Not really. There's nothing surprising about any of this. I know from experience that brides often drop or forget their bouquets. The strange thing is different. The ladies in black are the stuff of legend. That soothsayer face friend of Aunt Lisa's. Yes, but I have no idea how this messenger from hell ended up at your wedding. I have no idea either." That fact came as a real shock. Images from the past and images of people who were no longer alive began to spontaneously resurface in front of the woman's eyes. For some time, Nancy remained in a state of shock, and Molly became worried. "Nancy, why are you so excited? Let's go and have a cup of tea. You'll be out of here in no time." "No, I don't feel like doing anything." "Look, don't worry. It's all over and done with. If I'd known that movie would make such an impression on you, I wouldn't have shown it to you." Nancy got up abruptly, "And I'm going to go. I need to be alone for a while." Molly, not hiding her resentment, muttered, and the tea mother tried, already prepared everything. "Molly, don't be offended. Next time we'll have tea." And so we sat. "I don't understand, Nancy. Why are you making such a fuss? There's nothing we can do about it anyway. What's the point? You have a perfectly happy family. It's safe to say you've had a good life." "Yeah, you could say that. Or you could say it another way. I have a favor to ask you. If you can find out about this fortune teller." Nancy met the family hearth with a ringing silence. On the heart was empty and did not want to do anything. The woman walked to the bedroom and stood in front of the large mirrors. She asked her reflection, "How happy are you, Nancy?" And she cried because she knew the answer to that question. She was no longer surprised that for the second time in one day she had to mentally answer him. Why had fate made such an abrupt reversal now? A period of reflection. Nancy's post-graduation period was short-lived. She realized that she was more attracted to architecture in the classical sense of the term. The girl thought that her father would be happy to hear about her decision. Alex cautiously asked Nancy, "Confess, did you really choose this institute by the call of your heart or for the sake of principle?" "Daddy, how could you think that about me? You know that I have been dreaming since my childhood." Father interrupted his daughter. "Childhood dreams and adulthood are not the same thing. Dreams most often turn to dust, and one realizes that one has fallen into one's own trap. I really don't want my daughter to be trapped like that. But if it's a sensible choice, I'm only happy for you." Nancy assured her father, "Papa, it is a sensible choice. I really want to be an architect. And it's a decision I made quite consciously." At this point, the discussion of their daughter's future was over, and the parents did not bring up the subject again. Despite the big competition, Nancy entered the university from the first time. She was also lucky in that she was enrolled on a budget. The young girl's imagination of the future was imagined full of grandiose affairs. About meetings with guys, she did not think then, because she considered the main goal of her studies. Together with her in the same institute entered the girl who studied in their school. Only Betty had graduated a year earlier than Nancy. The acquaintance was very happy when she met Nancy in the corridor of the institute. "Hello, nice surprise. At least one familiar face." Nancy was happy too. "It's nice to see you too. What department are you in? Did you have to apply for economics?" "I didn't get enough points to get into the budget, so I had to apply for a fee. No other options. I failed last year. And this year I'm unlucky again. It happens. Yes, fate doesn't favor everyone, but unlucky in love. You know, I've got a guy who's got 1,000 kilos in the firm and money at our institute, probably the son of some important official." "No, you didn't. My beau has already graduated as a mechanic and works in a car service. The money's just flowing into his pocket. You know, I've only been dating him for a month, and he's already given me a ring." Nancy gasped in surprise. "You're marrying him so fast?" Betty rolled her eyes. "If only our relationship were still in the active stage of development. Vetpova gave me a ring with a small stone in it, so no hints yet, but I'm waiting for him to get an engagement ring." Such conversations between young men and maidens are frequent, and Nancy has had to listen to confessions from close friends more than once, and this time she only listened to Betty's revelations out of politeness, and by evening she had forgotten the conversation with her altogether. About a week later, the girls met again in the same hallway. Betty immediately gave Nancy a friendly peck on the cheek and said meaningfully, "You and I, like in the popular song, at the same place at the same hour. How can you not believe in fate?" Nancy waved it away. "Come on, it can't be otherwise. After all, we're at the same institute and walk the same corridors." Betty reluctantly agreed. "That's true, but I'm a bit of a fatalist. I'm generally fascinated by all things mystical. Then laughs at me, says my brain's turned the wrong way." Nancy thought she'd be offended by a guy who criticized her intelligence instead of complimenting it, but she did not express her opinion aloud, for she considered her acquaintance with Betty an inconsequential everyday trifle. What was my surprise when she saw Owl Island again the day after class. Betty was a little confused. "I'm sorry to barge in on you, but I have some business to attend to." Nancy was in a hurry to get home because she had promised her parents to clean the apartment, but good manners prevailed, and she asked politely how I could help you. The friend immediately became animated. "You see, my Ben is having a party tonight. He asked me to invite the girls so that their mail company wouldn't get bored. I asked my friends, but they all had emergencies tonight. So help me out, friend." Nancy intuitively put her hands to her chest. "Betty, I'm sorry, but I can't make it tonight either. I've got a lot on my plate at home. I have a paper due. I'll do it another time." She responded by tugging on the sleeve of her raincoat. "I promised Ben today, and I don't want to disappoint him. He's so cool, so macho, and I can already see myself next to him in a suspended dress." Nancy shook her head, and Betty continued to talk her down. "Look, this is a chance to find a good guy. My Ben doesn't hang out with just anyone. His friends list includes the sons of bureaucrats and professors. Betty, I don't need this. I'm not looking for a life partner yet. I have other interests. You should. You have to do everything in a timely manner, especially not marriage and children. That's what my mom says, and I trust her completely." Nancy did not enter into an argument with the intrusive girl and made a new attempt to get rid of her. But at that time, a young man of a political build approached them. "Tanyusha, this is your friend. Pleased to meet you. Ben, master of old and new iron." The guy extended his hand to her and had to respond with a reciprocal gesture. Betty's beau behaved confidently and even a little on the head, and Nancy was confused by such an onslaught. So it took Ben less than a minute to persuade the girl. She spent another quarter of an hour to warn her parents and change her clothes. The party was a buffet, so all the guests behaved relaxed. Nancy only drank orange juice. She wouldn't even touch the food. Betty stayed close to her lover all evening. She looked faithfully into his eyes and caught his every word. Such subservience disgusted Nancy, and she waited impatiently for this social performance to end. Several times Ben approached her and inquired, "Nancy, I hope you're not bored." She smiled. "No, not at all. You're having a wonderful time." As the guests began to leave, Nancy slipped into the hallway and pulled her coat from the coat rack. She opened the door. Outside, she breathed a full sigh and thought she had just wasted an entire evening. The next day, Betty voiced her grievances. "Why did you run out early? You could have warned me. I'm looking for my friend, and my friend isn't here. Our relationship is hardly what you'd call a friendship in the old days. So I don't owe you anything, and you don't owe me anything." I was very tired and decided to leave. Betty waved her hand. "Come on, you don't have to explain. It's clear enough." Everyone forgot and dispersed. Nancy was very happy about the peaceful resolution of the situation, but she still walked around looking around for a few more days. She didn't want to meet Tanya anymore, but quite unexpectedly, she met the fiancé of her acquaintance. It was all the fault of some malfunction in her father's car. Alex had been complaining about the problem for a long time, but he didn't have time to go to the car service. And one morning, when all the family wanted to go to the village, the car did not want to start. The men sighed, doomed all the dead. "My cars need to be repaired." Alex called his good acquaintance, and he promised to pull him to the nearest car service. "Alex, such masters there will put the car on a wheel by evening. In aviation, they put equipment on the wing, but here on the wheel. Really, it's a great idea." Alex agreed with that conclusion. Well done. I wouldn't have thought of that." Nancy had never been interested in cars before, but here she started to get curious. I really wanted to see with my own eyes how the craftsman would create a miracle. After all, my father's car was quite an ancient unit and needed to be replaced long ago. But Alex did not even want to hear about buying a new car. "My Swallow has not yet exhausted its resource. It is still capable of what a pile of ruled parts can do." The father did not say, but the daughter believed him. That day she too decided to support her father. "Dad, can I come with you?" Alex wondered. "And what will you do there?" "A car service is not a beauty salon. There is nothing interesting there for a young girl." "So what? I'll just watch how scrap metal is transformed into a workable unit." "If that's the case, then let's go." The master who was to perform the miraculous transformation before her eyes. The miraculous transformation was Ben. The young man recognized her immediately and was very happy. "Nancy, what brings you here?" "It's just my dad's car doesn't want to work. We will now look and determine the cause of disobedience of your machine, and then treat it." Alex was surprised that his daughter knew the master, who was recommended to him by an acquaintance. Trying not to attract attention, he whispered to his daughter Nancy, "I did not suspect that you have such useful friends." The girl also answered in a whisper, "Dad, Ben is not my friend. He's a fiancé. Thin Isle of yours. Remember I told you about the girl from our school? We're in college together, only she's in economics." He made a statement that said, "Yeah, I remember something. I think her father once worked in my brigade, but the pay didn't suit him, so he moved to the public utilities." Yeah, that's his exact last name. While the daughter and father were discussing mutual acquaintances, the car service workers promptly carried out diagnostics and began to fix the problem. Ben was pleased and informed the customers. "It could have been worse, but it was nothing serious. So in an hour or a little more, your car will be on the road." Alex was glad to hear from the master not so much reassuring prognosis as an affectionate nickname, which he always used when it came to his car. He gave Ben's hand a long shake. "Thank you for your understanding. It's a pleasure to have you take on the task of repairing my car. It is rare to find such competent professionals among young people today." Ben accepted the praise with a satisfied smile. He himself did not take his eyes off the client's daughter when the car was completely ready. Master and suggested Alex to check the performance of the vehicle. Nancy, the father, settled into the driver's seat and lost sight of his daughter for a while. Only later Nancy realized that Ben in such an innocuous way eliminated the father to the girl with whom he needed to talk privately. The young man, without further preamble, stated to Nancy, "After that evening, I don't find myself in a place." The girl did not understand what the boy, who by all accounts was not lacking in female companionship, was getting at. "Are you ill?" Ben felt his eyes. "Perhaps my condition can be called a disease. Your image haunts me day and night, and I don't know what to do about it." "Are you kidding? I thought you had a real health problem. My mom works at the hospital. She could help you get checked out." "Oh, thank you. I'll definitely take advantage of this unique opportunity, but a little later. For now, I'd like to ask you a small favor." Nancy had a responsive heart, and she prepared to listen to the guy's request. She even thought that Ben would ask for something to put into words for Tatiana, but what he said instantly made the blood rush to her face. "Nancy, I'd like to meet you. We could go to a movie or take a walk in the park. How would you like that?" The girl was confused. But you, Ben, guessed what confuses Nancy. "If you mean Tatiana, we have nothing in common with her. Absolutely nothing. She and I were having a nice time together, that's all." Nancy remembered Betty proudly showing her Ben's gift. The island had acted arrogant, as if she were the most attractive girl on the planet. Nancy had wanted to rub her nose in it from day one. And she had quickly realized that the most effective way to do that was to steal Betty's fiancé. Nancy lowered her eyes languidly and barely audibly mumbled, "I don't mind going out with you." Nancy didn't realize that her love had taken her on a whirlwind spin. After her first romantic encounter with Ben, and just a few dates later, she was already catching every word he said. Ben Duden gave her an engagement ring 3 months later, and Nancy immediately agreed to become his wife. When Betty learned that her friend had literally stolen her fiancé from under her nose, she wished her, "One day you will give with someone else's happiness, and I wish only one thing to happen as soon as possible." Betty was not among the guests at their wedding, nor did Nancy meet her afterward, because her life had changed dramatically after her marriage. First, her parents died tragically, and then a sweet little girl was born. Helen, the young mom, had to leave her studies at the institute and devote all of herself to her family. But she made this choice without regret. Only years later, she began to think more and more often, it could have been different if you hadn't dropped out or married another guy. The sun had been pouring down without mercy since early morning today, and the air conditioners were on full blast in the beauty salon. And Vanessa was enjoying the coolness. She was lazily flipping through the latest issue of a fashion magazine, waiting for her son's turn. Only Sophia knew how to turn the latest dunce into a real beauty, and Vanessa treasured her friendship with her very much. She glanced at her watch and took another magazine from the stack. Thoughts slowly flowed through her head like boats in a pond, and Vanessa calmed their slow, even relaxed flow. She was happy with everything, with the way her life had turned out and with her trade, which brought a steady income. Sophia appeared in the waiting room and, in a sweet voice, said, "You are already here. Now literally just a minute more. Please bear with me. I will sign a little to the client and invite you in." Vanessa condescendingly waved his hand. "Don't worry, Sophia. It's such a divine chill. I'm ready to sit for hours. I am very glad you are comfortable." And Vanessa sank back into pleasant thoughts. When the Creator had distributed his gifts to the earth, he had obviously not noticed the small villas, so she had gotten practically nothing but inventive minds. Unique, capable with an ugly girl manifested itself already in kindergarten, and educators were surprised. So ugly, but so smart. Probably, she will become a scientist when she grows up. Vanessa's parents do not bother to take care of their daughter. They were constantly fighting. The girl was thrown like a ball from one old man to another. But since Vanessa was an unusual child, she liked this way of life. Then her parents separated for good, and the girl was sent to be raised by her great-grandmother, who lived on an abandoned farm. Vanessa still does not know to whom the old woman was a relative. Her real name also forever remained a mystery, because the grandmother's name was simple and clear. The Old Vane. The old woman was not offended by this attitude, and cheerfully said, "Let them call me Pan at least, as long as they paid me money." The grandmothers practiced fortune-telling and conspiracies for the villagers. Vanessa had heard that she was a hereditary sorceress. Sometimes, when her grandmother was in a good or cheerful mood, she helped her. These were especially happy moments, because the girl could go into the room where the grandmother prepared potions from herbs and summoned spirits without fear. The child's brain memorized and absorbed everything. Despite her young age, Vanessa already knew that in the future she would also predict the future and reveal the secrets of the past. Perhaps in time, Vanessa would have mastered all the dough and methods. But the old sorceress died suddenly, and the girl again began to shuttle between the houses of relatives. But the experience she had gained helped her earn money for pocket money. Already in elementary school during recess, the girl crowded near her desk. "Vanessa, tell me what I'll get for the test." And she willingly made a prediction, although such predictions did not always correspond to reality. The young fortune teller's popularity grew by the day. High school students, including boys, began to turn to her to guess the ticket number for exams. For such consultations, Vanessa took pennies. Considering that she could easily make 100 predictions a day, she always had money. But someone in the young fortune teller's clientele blabbed about her business, and Vanessa got the attention of the juvenile police, the elderly relatives she was staying with at the time. The parents of the negligent girl are just like her. She's been running scams since she was that age. What will she make of it? Since the parents of the villa could not find even the best specialists of internal affairs, and all the grandparents went into complete denial. The bright girl was determined in boarding school, but the words Vanessa ran after her on her heels, and she did not have time to spend the night in the State House. No matter how much praise the clientele 30-year-old fortune tellers, in addition to the basic techniques, divination perfectly possessed the voice, and each session turned into a small but exciting performance. The teacher and nannies carried sweet gifts to the girls and asked them to say what would happen to their relatives of the same age. The boys were most interested, and they consulted her on the matter. Once the stableman called aside, and Uncle Peter, and embarrassed, asked to make him a conspiracy for a drink. "I'm not comfortable approaching you on such a delicate matter, but my spouse has not quite got me down. She eats me up, and every day they tell me you're gonna drink. I'll put you in the hospital. Make me a potion that'll make me feel better all at once." The request was unusual, but I was coming out of the recesses of my memory the recipe by which my great-grandmother had once prepared a decoction for the director of the local collective farm. A surprising thing, but the man stopped drinking. Peter's uncle was also satisfied with the result of the treatment prescribed by the little sorceress. In a burst of the kindest feelings, he advised her to make up a pseudonym for herself. That's what all the famous mediums do. If you don't know your name, your tongue will get confused, and your last name doesn't even sound good. It's rude and primitive. You'll have to come up with something to fit your brain. Willa thanked the stable boy for the tip and headed for the library. She spent several days poring through thick books until she found what Vivienne Monaco needed. She was sure that such a colorful pseudonym would ensure her a successful future. But soon the girl realized that for success is not enough for one voiced name. It still needs connections, and the circle of acquaintances of the boarding school graduate is too narrow. Vanessa realized that she only has to wait for that happy accident, which in an instant can change everything. 3 years passed in this waiting. During this time, Vivienne received a specialty of a secretary at the local school. But to get a job, the girl was in no hurry. To provide herself with a tolerable existence, she began to visit strange places, where she fortune-telling to all comers. Especially good catch was in the electric trains, but after a few successful trips, she was found out by competitors and robbed to the thread. At parting, one of the freaks warned her that if you get caught again, you'll be in trouble. Vanessa did not risk her precious life and continued practicing in parks and recreation areas. True, in the wintertime visiting such places was minimal. Freezing. Citizens refused the services of the fortune-teller, so she often went to bed with an empty stomach. The young fortune-teller was quite desperate when the very case she had been waiting for came up. During one of her visits to the park, when she was in despair, she noticed a newspaper neatly rolled up in a garbage can. Vanessa immediately clicked in my head. And it's no accident. There's definitely something in this paper for you. Ignoring the chill wind, she sat down on the ice-encrusted bench and eagerly read the advertisements at the bottom of the page. In bold print was a message to all those who have extraordinary abilities. We invite you to take part in the first regional psychic contest. Then, in smaller font, followed a brief description of the conditions and the address where the selection would take place. Vanessa immediately felt a burst of energy. She was no longer tormented by hunger cramps in her stomach and dizziness. She could already see herself winning the contest, basking in the rays of glory. That vision almost completely came true, with the only difference being that hers came in second place. But the prize of audience sympathy was awarded to her, along with a pretty hefty sum of money. The contest was divided into several stages. But all this time, Vanessa lived in the apartment of a kind woman who was obsessed with occult practices. Lisa had a daughter, but she disappeared from the house as soon as she saw the strange guests in her apartment. Vanessa herself was not very happy as a child and asked the landlady, Aunt Lisa, if we should clean up. "It's awkward. We're comfortable here, and your daughter is nowhere to be found." "It's okay. My daughter has relatives across town. My late husband's brother and Molly's family came to visit. You're not shy. Make yourself at home now." Vanessa physically felt a thin string break in her heart. She cried on the bosom of this kindest woman and told her about her hard life. Lisa comforted her for a long time, and then the legend suddenly asked her for a picture of the relatives to whom Molly had gone. "Aunt Lisa, do you have a picture of them?" The woman was surprised. "Can you tell from a picture?" "I didn't." Lisa rummaged through the drawers of the dresser for a long time until she pulled out an old photograph. "This is just one of them. Here they are, the whole family, so to speak. Vanessa ran her hand over the picture and handed it back to the owner. Things are not good in this family. Soon your niece will be in misfortune, and she's in no hurry to get married. The aunt was surprised. It's something out of a fantasy world. Nancy is only 19. She's still in school. And Molly never said anything about her getting married. And they're sisters, but as friends. Vanessa said sadly, I'm rarely wrong. Practice makes perfect in our business. If you could tell me when their wedding is, maybe I can make up for it. But the most unforeseen thing happened. The young bride was so confused that she accidentally dropped her bouquet. Vanessa was nearby at the time. She tried to catch the crowning symbol, but failed. She picked up the bouquet and wanted to give it to the girl who was standing next to her, but she noticed an unkind glint in the stranger's eyes and changed her mind. There was nothing else to do but keep the wedding amulet. Of course, Vanessa was well aware of wedding customs, but she had no other choice. Unexpectedly, she thought to herself, wondering how the couple's lives had turned out. They must have split up a long time ago. Sophia, with a smile on her face, reappeared in the waiting room and cooed, "Forgive me, for God's sake. Such a capricious client. As soon as she saw that you also came to me, she started to be capricious. It's not like that, and it's sticking out. I had to redo almost the whole hairstyle." The fortune teller smiled graciously. "That's all right. Believe me, I wasn't bored, because I had time to think about important things. And then you have a really comfortable environment here." Ben had a hard time closing his eyelids. "Well, it's morning. Uncle Ben, it's time to get ready for work. Just thinking about the bosses getting in my face. I get so sick." Nancy rolled over on her other side. "Ben, you have to move the whole house. I wanted to get a little lower in bed today on the second shift. And on the subject of bosses, I can tell you that if you had your brains in the right place, you wouldn't have to take orders from someone else today." "Thank you." Wife was supportive. The man threw back the blanket and grabbed his pants from the chair, but while trying to pull on his tights, he got tangled in his pant leg and almost fell. What kind of life is this? Pants don't even want to listen to me. "Nancy, did you give me a steak or a potion? What kind did you slip me? I'm getting chalky in my old age. I've got nothing else to worry about. How can I poison you? You're the one who's trying to get off the hoof. If you don't stop drinking vodka by the bucketful. Why are you slandering me? I know the measure. If you knew the measure, you wouldn't have drunk your car dealership, and I wouldn't be counting pennies till payday. Wow, poor underprivileged people, you should have studied instead of dropping out of school. I'm sorry, but the cleaning lady pays the minimum wage." Nancy couldn't take it anymore. "Ben, you still have the nerve to reproach me. If I hadn't married you, I wouldn't have to drive a rag across other floors. You're the one who led me astray." The woman sat down on the edge of the bed and said dreamily, "And in general, if I had studied and received a diploma, I would hardly marry you. It was a hard blow to the male ego. So you regret it. 20 years together. That's not a word. Suddenly, you're regretting it." Nancy was about to say something mean to her husband, but her daughter knocked on the door. "Mom, Dad, don't you get tired of the same thing every morning? If only, why do you keep trying to make the past go away? Normal people live for today." Ben grumbled to Helen, "Really, it's too late for you and me to change anything. Although you do have someone. I'm thinking, who is this mysterious nickname that keeps calling you?" Helen yelled from the kitchen, "Parents, I love you very much, and please don't make a scene like Othello and Desdemona." The couple laughed amicably, and Ben cheerfully remarked, "There's something to it, although you will not be Desdemona. But Othello of me will definitely get the same type. Only if you believe Shakespeare, Moore did not use combustible mixtures. William just decided to hide this fact, so as not to disgrace his hero." Nancy looked at the hero's watch. "If you keep scratching your tongue, I'll definitely be late for work. And the boss is happy to cotton on to you. You're glad. Why should I suffer? I'm never late, and the bosses appreciate me. Time was really running out, and Ben was eating breakfast on the go. He was almost at the door when he remembered Molly's call. Nancy, yesterday, when you were away, our wedding general called. She said she had some important information for you. Call her cell phone tonight. The woman grumbled in her heart. Once again, this beast ran away without saying goodbye. What kind of manner? Is it so hard to come in for a moment, to talk humanly? Helen stuck her head through the open door. Mom, you know that Aunt Molly is not an ordinary person. I don't know how you can do this for almost 20 years in a row. I would have lost my wedding business for sure. That's what it looks like from the outside. And when pressed, you learn to sing like a nightingale and polka butterfly dance. Helen looked at her mom's mother with an expressive look at her mother's mother. I don't like that you and your father are always fighting. Maybe we're boring each other. That's what happens in life. People live, and then bam. They can't stand each other. Mom, you surprised me. I always believed you two loved each other. Love is only in books and movies. Life is so much simpler than that. You better tell me, do you still have your phone number? Helen carelessly threw Mom. Today there are more convenient and faster ways to get in touch with the right person. I'll set you up with a virtual conference call. Just tell me when it would be most convenient for you to talk to Aunt Molly. Tonight, Nancy thought for a moment. Just don't say anything to your father, and you don't want him to hear what we're going to talk about. Helen held his breath in anticipation of something interesting. Mommy, can I have some secrets? I love secrets and mysteries. I confess I overheard a little bit of your conversation with Molly last night. You were talking about a wedding, some fortune teller you mentioned. I'd love to be at the center of something intriguing. The woman interrupted her daughter's reverie. You should be thinking about your studies. The session is coming up, and you haven't opened a single book. You'll stay like me and scrub the floors until they shine. Helen grimaced. Mom, don't predict a bitter fate for me. I will definitely learn and get a diploma. And even if I have to get married at such an early age, I won't be in a hurry to continue my family. Oh, don't be so sure. Everyone says that, and then changes their mind. You're not going to put off having kids until you retire. Then my father and I will not be lucky enough to see grandchildren. My daughter looked at her watch. Oh, Mommy, I'm so late. Let's see you tonight. Nancy leisurely put her room in order and for some reason took out a photo album. The images from Molly's movie kept popping up in front of her eyes. She kept coming back to that mysterious brunette with the piercing eyes. I don't know why, but I wanted to know what the fortune teller's words meant. The time dragged outrageously slow, and she barely waited for Helen to return. Her daughter immediately skipped into the kitchen. Mammy, I remember everything and about our conversation, and about the promise not to say anything. Daddy, now, I'll just pop something tasty in my beak, and you and I will call Aunt Molly. Nancy had never communicated with her sister via video link before, and it was a real miracle for her to see her own face on the screen. The sisters said hello, and Molly got right down to business. Nancy, I'm sorry, but I'm running out of time. It's another wedding. Yes, it is. But it's Wednesday. People get married on Mondays. There's nothing you can do about it. Okay, let's not get sidetracked. Turns out my mom still keeps in touch with her. It'll be nice when I get to meet this woman. Are you sure you want to meet her? Think about it. Maybe we shouldn't change anything. Okay, I'll think about it. Then you let me know or get Lena to send me a message. The screen went out, and Helen said disappointedly, I still haven't learned anything interesting. Nancy felt incredibly tired. You still have interesting things ahead of you. Take your time, daughter. I'm going to go to bed. And will you feed Daddy when he gets home from work? Nancy had hoped she would be able to sleep. But now, after talking to her sister, anything but sleep was coming into her head. She was going over all the events she had to remember. And now one came up that she had long forgotten. It wasn't even an event. It was one phrase Ben had thrown at the wedding. It was the one that had left her confused. Even the mood was gone. By the end of the party, she told herself it was all a figment. Her fantasy had played out. The case was like this. They were accepting congratulations, and Ben was smiling contentedly, hugging her. Nancy was hot, and she threw off his arm. The young husband leaned toward her. "What's all this caprice? Don't you realize that you look so good? Only next to me alone you're not so good anymore." He put his hand on her shoulder again. Nancy wondered, wondering if he really thought that, or if he was just making a bad joke. Of course, she really wanted to find out. But then she got dizzy, forgot herself, and decided she was smug. Her husband had blurted it out without thinking. Now lying on the bed, she recalled some of their moments, some of their phrases, and she realized that Ben, even now, after he was only a short time away from being a real alcoholic, he sincerely thought he'd done her a big favor by marrying her. He also really didn't like the fact that she was working as a cleaning lady. Nancy sat up abruptly in bed. It was true, after all, when he had to sell his auto repair shop because it had stopped making a profit. Profits, as you know, are made by the businesses that are run. He naturally got drunk and consoled himself in the kitchen. "It's nothing. But now we have a nice family, an unemployed man and a cleaning lady. That doesn't sound like a businessman and a cleaning lady." Nancy hadn't paid much attention to his words then, but now she felt very hurt. The woman quickly got out of bed, opened the closet, took out a sock in which she hid her rainy day supplies, took a few bills from it, dressed, and moved toward the kitchen exit. Helen peeked out. "Oh, Mom, where are you going?" "Daddy will be here soon." Nancy grinned wryly. "Well, he'll only be here in his usual state, not even realizing what's for dinner or who's home. I'll be back in a couple hours. My mom's all out." And that has something to do with it. Nancy didn't let her daughter finish her sentence. "Stop making up stuff. Nothing has anything to do with anything. I just decided to get a haircut. I've been walking around like a bum." Helen's mouth slowly opened. For as long as she could remember, her mother's was unchanging. She couldn't imagine her mom. "You're so full of it. Go on, go. Our happiness will be crawling in soon." "Mom, why are you doing this?" Nancy didn't answer anything. She went out into the yard. That's where Ben's supposed to come from, so she'll go the other way. She walked for a long time, hesitating to enter the hairdresser's shop. It was probably because she hadn't been to such places for a long time. Finally, she made up her mind. "Hello," the master turned to her and smiled. She had just styled a black-haired woman. "Hello. I'm sorry, we're full for the day." "Excuse me." Nancy was about to turn around as a customer. Sophia said suddenly, "Your last client for today is not coming, so you can safely take this woman. You're just finishing up." The master looked confusedly at her client, then at Nancy. "You can wait a little while. If the person who signed up doesn't show up within 10 minutes, I'll take you." The customer turned to Nancy. "You wait, no one is coming." Nancy gasped. She recognized the woman immediately. It was the same fortune teller with the strange name who had picked up the bride's bouquet. Now Nancy was agonizingly trying to remember where it had then gone when the satisfied woman stood up. Nancy turned to her at once. "Not really, may I speak to you?" The woman looked at her in surprise. "Why are you rushing things? Your aunt has already called me, and we will see each other very soon. It's just that I need a little time to get everything ready." Nancy started to feel scared. Rent leaned into her, not trying to change anything. It wouldn't work. Just accept it the way it's going to be, no matter how much it hurts you. Nancy recoiled from her. She had long since known that prediction she had once voiced to them. Aunt Lissa had also been pronounced military. Ta flashed her black eyes. "Don't be afraid. Sometimes you have to lose something to find it." She walked out of the barber shop and Sophia took a breath. "I'm always afraid when she comes to me. Even though Vivian Lee always smiles kindly, leaves a nice tip, but when she looks at me with her eyes, it's like she sees everything from the inside out. She's such a legend." "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm talking to you. Have a seat. What would you like?" Nancy smiled. I'd like to change everything. Sophia smiled back. That's what we'd like. Shall we get started? Nancy looked at herself in the mirror and didn't recognize herself. Was she really attractive? And quite a young woman. She's Sophia. You're a wizard. It's not me. It's your desire to be different. I'll give you the number of a very good craftsman who can fix your hands. Nancy didn't realize she had nodded. Nancy's predictions were all wrong. There was certainly nothing of the fortune teller in her, because Ben had come home sober. Even Helen almost fainted. She tried not to show it, though. Daddy, come to dinner. She walked past her father twice, trying to catch the scent, but she couldn't. But her father figured out her plan. I haven't been drinking. You can. You didn't take it. I didn't take it. Helen just sighed, blushing deeply, even though they had a father like that. But Helen loved her father. Loved her mother, too, of course. But Nancy was sometimes too strict, and Papa in any condition pitied and spoiled her daughter. Ben sat down at the table, took up his spoon, and his mother, where Helen rested, who crouched in front of him with a plate, snickered if she had gone somewhere. Ben choked up. I mean somewhere. It's okay that it's evening. Helen shrugged. It's not that kind of evening. As long as the barbershops are open, she said, and bought herself a tongue. What's it for? Maybe Mom wanted to surprise Dad. They've been fighting so much lately. Barbershops. Ben put it down carefully. I didn't feel like eating the spoon for some reason. Something had been going on in their family lately. He was pretty sure there was no way Nancy could know that he'd accidentally cheated on her 3 months ago. That's just how it happened. Where had this sturgeon come from that had flown to him back in his youth? They drank, remembered and remembered. He sobered up immediately. He ran away from her headlong. Couldn't understand how that could have happened. And now Nancy has repeated several times lately that she regrets living with him. I mean, she could understand. He had done nothing to make her study then. And then I didn't do the whole putting myself first thing all the time. She would have learned. She'd look like that Sidorova, all fashionable, beautiful, and you can't tell what's on her nose. Dad, why aren't you eating? I don't feel like it. Do you know where these hairdressers work? Helen looked at her watch. Well, the ones in the center close in an hour. Another hour passed in complete silence. Ben carefully pretended to watch TV, and Helen looked at him anxiously. Something was going on in their family, and now Helen couldn't figure out who was to blame. The door slammed suddenly. Both Ben and Helen immediately jumped out into the hallway. Helen whistled. Mommy, it's definitely you. Nancy smiled embarrassedly. Her long hair was gone. Now Nancy had a short haircut and a very pretty chocolate color. Sophia also redid her eyebrows and shaped them. Well, who did? Mom, you look 20 years younger. I'm the one who looked so bad. My mood immediately soured. This is what the average family has brought themselves to. An alcoholic husband and a wife who's long since given up on herself. She glanced at her husband, ready to see the usual cloudy look. It was strange that he was still awake. Usually by 9 o'clock he was already wasted, spreading the smell of booze around him. Nancy had long ago learned to place the pillow between them in such a way that his breath hit her and not Nancy. But Ben was sober. He silently turned around and walked off to his room. Nancy grinned sadly, apparently not at all. Ben's idea of what cleaning ladies should look like. Molly called suddenly, late at night 2 days later. That's what she always did, though. She liked to call when they were expecting a visit, when they didn't have time to visit at all. Nancy, here's the deal. The fortune teller will be here tomorrow night. She's expecting you. They wanted to call you tonight, but I could barely talk them into waiting. I won't be back until tomorrow. I can't miss an event like this. I would have filmed the whole thing. Wait, what's wrong with you? The sister finally stopped talking and stared at Nancy from the screen. Nancy rushed over to tell you. Hello, Molly. You're not talking my teeth in. Hello. What's the matter with you, Helen? You're gonna sneak the phone around your mother. Helen smilingly obeyed her aunt's orders. You know how to surprise me, Nancy. I thought it was all over. You're like a fish. Great. I don't have time for this. I'll see you tomorrow. And Molly immediately disconnected. No goodbye, no see you again. Nancy just shook her head. The years go by. Nothing changes in Molly, only the digit in the passport. Helen sat down next to her mother. Is that so bad? But she's so agile, so energetic, so fashionable. Nancy sighed. And that simple female happiness, she has neither husband nor children. 10 more years, maybe more. And then what? Helen looked carefully at her mother's mother and for the first time talked to her the way one talks to adults. Mom, do you have this very happiness? Nancy tensed up. Why do you ask? Helen shrugged her shoulders. Well, you and Dad fight all the time. Are you saying you don't want to live with him? It wasn't like that before, even though he hasn't been drinking for a long time. Nancy sighed. I don't know how to answer that. Well, first of all patience comes to an end. I think you realize that. Secondly, in a relationship, people who live together for a long time, sooner or later there comes a moment of, how can I put this delicately? Helen immediately suggested a crisis. Well, you could say that. Thirdly, yes, I have female happiness. As strange as that sounds, I have you and your father. We had a lot of good years before he got like this. Mom, why did he get like that? I can't tell you that, Helen, because I don't know. Okay, I'm gonna go to bed. I have to get up early in the morning, and I can't sleep, since we have to go to Molly's. Helen got up. Mom, take me with you, and I'll take one look at her. I'll see who I can get a look at. She's not so famous now, but she's still in the papers. She used to be a star. Nancy was just about to read to her daughter that she didn't need such meetings. As the front door opened, Ben arrived on time, which meant he was sober again. Sober Ben was not part of Nancy's plans. She'd explained to him 10 times yesterday that she had a headache. That wasn't going to work tonight, so she'd have to pretend she was asleep. Yeah, okay, but to keep me quiet in there. Nancy quickly shut the bedroom door behind her. Helen was old enough to realize that this was her mother's way of avoiding seeing her father. Hi, where's Mom? I bought a cake. Helen suddenly felt so sorry for her father. Dad, she's already gone to bed. She has to get up early. Ben looked upset. Yeah, that's right. She's a daughter. Let's go and have tea with you then. Helen nodded readily. Come on, Dad. Ben was sober again. For the second day in a row, this had not happened to him for years. The next day, Nancy and Helen arrived at Molly's house. Her sister opened the door right away. Hello, family. No hugs because I'm playing hostess and baking pies today. Lisa showed up in the hallway. Baking, she rather transfers groceries. The woman grumbled, but without malice. Helen immediately volunteered Aunt Molly. Can I help you? May I? No, you have to. Because I have a wild urge to throw this dough at the window. Helen laughed and took them after her aunt. Lisa looked at Nancy carefully. How good you look, Nancy. All is well. Well, come on, food is waiting for you. Nancy suddenly felt very scared. She's already here. She's been here half an hour since she got here. They walked into the room. Nancy immediately recognized the woman who had been in the hairdresser's. I looked at her closely, then reached into a black bag and pulled it out. Oh, that's my wedding bouquet. She sighed. I should have thrown it away a long time ago. You've ruined your life. I don't feel sorry for you. So throw it away. Why do you keep dried flowers? Because they're not just dried flowers. They're your destiny. The bouquet was supposed to go to one of the girls. You dropped it and forgot. Nancy said uncertainly. But they're really just flowers. Just flowers, they are before the wedding. Well, and afterward, if you do it right. But for now, they're in the bride's hands. So your destiny isn't complete in them. You threw them under your feet and trampled on your destiny. But no, I'm fine. Why did you call me here to listen to your lies? Nancy, shut up. Yes, that woman with the piercing and black eyes was absolutely right. Your sister should have caught your bouquet. Only you did the wrong thing. And all your life you've regretted marrying him. Only you've only recently been able to admit it to yourself. I kept him. That's why my love life didn't work out, although I don't regret it at all. Nancy looked up with hopeful eyes. What am I supposed to do now? We have a daughter. It'll take her a while to understand, but she will. And you need to finish what wasn't finished at the wedding. Molly fought with the filling. The first batch of pies was already in the oven. The second batch was to be jammy. She wasn't the least bit worried about not being able to hear what was being talked about in the room. Knew for sure that if Nancy didn't, her mother would tell her everything. Molly, the woman, shuddered and turned sharply. Standing on the doorstep of the kitchen was Nancy, followed by Molly's mother and the catching legend. Nancy threw something at her, and Molly caught it. What is it? Nancy laughed. It's my sweet sister, my wedding bouquet that you were supposed to catch at the wedding. Molly laughed. Oh, I can't go with you. Tell me I'm getting married soon. Brenda spoke up calmly. You'll marry someone you never thought you'd marry. Just one important thing right now, so that the events that are coming up in your family don't fight about you. Remember the fact that it would have happened sooner or later anyway. Molly was confused for just a moment, then putting the bouquet aside, said I've had enough. Let's drink tea. Helen, taking out our works of art. Helen, as if she'd just woken up from a dream. She rushed to the oven. Helen just smiled. Study and learn. Will it be useful to you in your life? Oh, how useful. In the evening, when she had already gone home, Molly's mother went to bed. The two sisters sat in the kitchen with a bottle of wine. Nancy had just told her everything the fortune teller had told her, and was now thoughtfully shaking her glass, watching the wine shimmer in it. Molly asked Nancy almost in a whisper, "And what do you intend to do?" You know, Molly is not that relieved after the conversation. I've needed to talk to Ben for a long time. I'm sure he's drinking because he doesn't love me either. We're in a trap, you know, feeling the same thing, but we can't decide. If you're wrong, if he does love you. Nancy shook her head. He doesn't. Molly was silent for a while. Then she asked, "Okay, you talk to him. And then what?" "Then you won't believe this, but I don't want to be a janitor anymore. I'm gonna take a course. I don't know what I'm gonna take, but I'm gonna take a course. Maybe even more than one. I'll get another job. I'll go to the hairdressers once a month. I'll finally become a woman." For whom? For myself. Molly, you see, for me, it's like I've been asleep all these years, and now I realize I'm blaming Ben for everything. It's not that simple. What can I say? It's a shame about Ben. I think he'd be lost without you. Are you suggesting I give up on myself and my life and devote the rest of my life to him? Molly shook her head. Yes, sister, you've got fire in your mouth. I can't even argue with that. Maybe you should stay. It's too late for that. Even though it's a small town. Thank God there's no problem with cabs. The cab came surprisingly quickly. Nancy got into the car and said, "Wow, I've never driven a car like this before." The driver of the cool car smiled embarrassedly. "You see, I'm not a cab driver, but it's so boring at home in the evenings that I decided to do it. And you know, it's a very interesting profession. It turns out that so many people want to talk to a stranger." Nancy laughed out of the blue. "Oh, I'm definitely not going to tell you anything, because you won't believe me anyway." The man smiled at her in the mirror. "Where do you order me to take such a beautiful lady?" Nancy was embarrassed, gave the address. The man turned to her in surprise. "I'm sorry, I'm not mistaken. Did the compliment make you blush? I'd kill your husband and all the men around him." They drove to Nancy's house in silence. As she was getting out, the man handed her a business card. "Here you go. If you ever get lonely, you call. We'll go for a ride. Have a cup of coffee. I realize this all sounds weird, and I'm probably not at the age to ask you out like that, but I don't know what else to say to see you again." Nancy, who didn't want to take the business card, held out her hand first. I'll be sure to call you. Ben was sitting in the kitchen. Nancy walked in, pulling the air with her nose. No smell. So her husband is sober. 3rd day sober. That's good. Maybe we could have a normal conversation. She sat down across from me. Ben looked up at her. Ben, I know why you drink. Nancy, well, you want me to try to quit. She shook her head. It won't work. Ben raised his eyebrows upward. That's something I didn't expect you to say at all. Why not? Because you're gonna drink. As long as I'm around you. Ben looked at her in surprise. She continued to herself. Ben, we've been together for so many years that we basically shouldn't have any secrets from each other. And I don't understand why we're both trying to hide the obvious. You don't love me. I don't love you. Ben wanted to say something, but Nancy raised her hand. Wait, let me finish. You think about it, and you'll figure it out for yourself. We're not old yet. Maybe one of us will have a chance to be truly happy for a little while. There was silence in the kitchen for a couple minutes. Then Ben said, "What's the next thing you said about plans?" "I want to get a profession and stop cleaning up after others. And you'd be great if you could reopen your workshop." Ben grinned. "Do you think I can do it?" "I don't doubt it. If I'm not around, you'll succeed. We'll invite Natasha. She'll take great pictures for the commercials. All your clients will follow you. Ben, you've got golden hands." Helen sat silent for a long time when her parents told her their decision. Then she said to me, "Of course I don't like it. But if you decide so, if it's better for you, I hope you won't stop loving me." Ben moved out before the divorce when Nancy offered to exchange the apartment. He said, "No, Nancy, it's yours and Lena's. And I'm a man. I'll solve my own housing problems." Nancy hugged him for a second. "I sincerely wish it works out for you." Ben smiled back. "And I wish it for you too." That same day, Nancy called the number that was written on the business card. "Good afternoon. I don't know if you remember me. It's impossible to forget you. I never thought you'd call." Andrew was a retired military man, so a little straightforward, but very interesting. Nancy felt like a girl running to him for a date. Helen told the ladies every day, "Something you broke in my mind. Usually after a divorce, people get depressed, hurt, but you and Daddy are better. You look younger and better every day. Daddy's taken over the workshop, so he'll soon outdo his former master." Nancy immediately sat down opposite her daughter. "Helen, it's true. I'm so happy for him. You just can't imagine." Helen waved her hand. "Why not?" "Well, the Jackdaw's parents are divorced, too. It's been a year, and they've been spitting at each other. But in our family, it's the opposite. You're enjoying each other's success. That's our family. It's the opposite. By the way, Aunt Molly is helping Daddy a lot. She's got a whole ad campaign going. I didn't realize. I should call and thank her." Helen looked at her strangely, grinned and said, "Call, of course." Nancy didn't like to put things off, so she called her sister Molly in the evening. She didn't pick up for a long time, but finally answered. She sounded kind of doomed. "Yeah. Hi, Nancy. Hey, what's with the dying voice? Some rich fiancé didn't pay you again?" "No, I haven't photographed a wedding in 2 months." "What's wrong, Molly? You're the recognized wedding general." Nancy was really worried. "Molly, why don't we meet somewhere, sit and talk?" "Let's do it." Molly's voice was full of doom. Nancy hung up the phone and began to pack quickly. What kind of sister was she? Because of her new relationship, she didn't even ask how Molly was doing. What if she had something serious going on? It's true what they say, happiness blinds the eyes. Molly was sitting at the table, and Nancy noticed that her sister had lost some weight. Though she'd always looked good, now she looked like the cover of a magazine. Nancy had just sat down when she noticed a ring on her sister's finger. "So you didn't even tell your sister you were getting married?" "Well, I would have. I'm just going to." I can't hear the joy in her voice. "Don't you love him? Or does he love you?" "Does he love me?" "And I love him. I love him very much. I never thought it was possible to love like that in my life. I prayed on the walls. Is he married? No, not anymore. Then I don't understand what's wrong. Why do you look like you're committing the crime of the century? Molly looked up at her quickly. That's exactly what I'm doing. Molly, stop talking in riddles. Spit out who he is, and why are you in so much pain? Molly took in a chestful of air. Nancy, I apologize in advance. I didn't know it was even possible. I've known him forever. And I'm just now realizing that he's mine, that he's meant for me. Nancy even slammed her hand on the table. Molly, stop with the romantic nonsense. Just tell me what's going on. If he's hurting you, just tell me. Is there someone to stand up for you? It's Ben. That Ben on the wall immediately realized what Molly's sister was saying to her. What does Ben have to do with this? I said, who is he? I said, it's Ben. There was a pause at the table, and Nancy was a little taken aback by the news. I remembered the fortune teller's words about not fighting amongst themselves. Do you really love him? Molly just nodded. And yes, he's somewhere under the cafe window right now worrying about how our conversation is going to go. Nancy became Molly. Let me give you a hug. I guess you really are his muse. He can do what he can't do with me. Molly looked at her in amazement. You're not offended? Of course not. I'm glad. Now everyone's settled. I don't have to feel guilty anymore, and I can give Andrew my consent. He was tired of waiting for me to get married. They hugged each other and didn't immediately notice that someone else was standing next to them. When they turned around, the sisters' eyebrows crept upward in unison. Vanessa was standing next to their table, supported by an imposing man in a tuxedo. Hello. I see I'm not the only one affected by the completed bouquet. Nancy Molly nodded at the same time, smiled. Well, I wish you happiness. It's all right now. Every tree is yours. I'm getting married too. Legend smiled a prefabricated smile that was completely out of character. And they walked towards the exit. The sisters looked at each other and laughed. They felt so at ease, as if they had really corrected some long-standing mistake. The only thing they agreed on was that at their wedding, they would be very attentive to their bouquet. Life goes on, and I don't want to experiment anymore. I want to live in happiness and love.